Eunice Holloway just wanted to train. At 65, with a pink geesh and decades of pain behind her, she stepped onto a mat ruled by teenage bullies and silent coaches. They laughed. They mocked. They tried to break her without ever throwing a punch, but what they didn't know was that Eunice had been fighting her entire life. And when they pushed her too far, they gave her a reason to fly. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The morning sun rose soft over the sleepy town of Huxley, Georgia, a place where time moved slower, and so did change. On the cracked sidewalks that split the old downtown square, folks still nodded politely, but held their judgments like old recipes passed down through hushed tones and tighter smiles. Eunice Holloway stood outside Iron Core Martial Arts, clutching a drawstring gym bag, and wearing a pink G so bright it seemed to hum against the brick wall. At 65, with silver streaks hugging the edges of her tightly wound braid, and deep-set wisdom carved into every line of her dark skin, she didn't look like anyone's idea of a fighter. And maybe that's why they stared. Inside the gym, fluorescent lights flickered. Foam mats bore years of sweat and pride. Yet the air shifted sharply the moment Eunice stepped through the door. The laughter began in hushed pockets. 3 white teenage boys, Chad Riggins, Connor Welsh, and Zachy Trent, nudged each other as they watched her tie her belt with calm precision. The pink popped loudly against the grayscale sea of white, blue and black uniforms around her. A white mother in the corner leaned toward another, whispering behind her Yeti tumbler. "I think she's here for her grandson or something." Coach Raylan Becker, mid-40s, lean and stiff with a badge of military service sewn onto his uniform sleeve, blinked twice before stepping forward. "You lost, ma'am. We don't allow spectators on the mats without clearance." "I'm not here to watch," Eunice replied, her voice smooth and undisturbed. "I'm here to roll." Raylan forced a chuckle, tilting his head slightly. "You mean train?" "I know what roll means," she said simply, tightening her belt. That moment, tiny as a pinprick, sucked the air out of the room. The silence was broken by a giggle from Chad, who muttered, "Maybe she saw Karate Kid on cable, and thought it was a sign." Coach Raylan cleared his throat, clearly caught between courtesy and confusion. "All right then, warm-ups on the back mat." Eunice nodded and walked with quiet dignity past the stairs, past the awkward silence, and past the invisible wall that told her, as it always had, that she didn't belong. Flashback, 1963. Huxley High School. Eunice was 13, and the first black student allowed past the school's old red brick wall. She remembered the hallway echoes louder than any textbook, the paper planes labeled Mop Girl, the whispers of Tar Baby, the chalkboard graffiti she had to erase herself while the teacher pretended not to see. One boy had even spat in her direction during lunch. The entire cafeteria watched in silence as the spit hit the ground between her shoes. No punishment, no apology, just more silence. That silence followed her through decades. At the DMV, at PTA meetings, in waiting rooms and behind shopping carts. And now, it clung to the gym mats like stale sweat. Back at Iron Core, warm-ups had begun. Eunice moved with quiet precision, body low and balanced, each stretch deliberate and smooth. Years of yoga, backyard tai chi, and silent shadowboxing in her kitchen had prepared her more than anyone guessed. Still, whispers floated. Why would a granny want to fight? Maybe she's lost her marbles. I bet she breaks a hip before she breaks a sweat. Even the coach called out exaggeratedly. Modify if you need to, Miss Holloway. Don't strain yourself. But she didn't strain. She didn't need to. Eunice's strength didn't roar. It simmered, steady as breath, old as struggle. After warm-ups, Raylan paired students for light grappling rounds. Eunice was matched with Mira, a soft-spoken Hispanic teenager, who offered a polite smile. They moved carefully, respectfully. Eunice didn't try to dominate. She mirrored. She flowed. She learned. But Coach Raylan frowned. "Switch partners," he called, eyes narrowing. Next was Zachy, one of Chad's crew, barely 18 but built like a linebacker. He gave Eunice a cocky shrug and said, "Let's make this quick, Grandma." They squared off. Zachy charged harder than needed, reckless, forceful, a flash of arrogance in his every movement. Eunice evaded, stepped to the side, redirecting his weight. That's when it happened. Zachy twisted suddenly, his elbow flying high, and slammed it directly into Eunice's cheek. Gasps echoed. Someone whispered, "Damn." She stumbled back, clutching her face, Her eye watered instantly, and a deep red welt bloomed beneath the skin. Oops, Zaki said, barely feigning concern. Didn't mean it. Coach Raylan didn't flinch. Holloway, you good? Eunice straightened slowly. Her fingers moved away from her face, revealing the swelling, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. I'm fine, she said, but she wasn't. Not because of the elbow. Because of the message in it. The same message she'd been receiving her whole life. You don't belong here, and we'll make sure you feel it. She walked toward the bench quietly, not defeated, but measured. Inside her, something deeper than anger sparked. A cold resolve. From across the mat, Chad whispered to Zaki, just loud enough to carry. Guess pink's the color of pathetic after all. Zaki laughed. Coach Raylan didn't even blink. Outside, the sun had already set. Eunice sat in her old Buick, staring into the rearview mirror at the bruise swelling beneath her left eye. Her pink gi still glowed faintly under the dome light. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. But her grip on the steering wheel tightened, just slightly. Then her phone buzzed. A message from her grandson, Kareem. How'd it go, Grandma? She stared at the screen, paused, then typed. They laughed. But they won't for long. Unseen in the background of the dojo, a girl with a phone had secretly recorded Zaki's elbow to Eunice's face, and was already uploading it to TikTok under the caption, Pink gi, or not, this ain't right. By the second week, the air inside Ironcore Martial Arts no longer smelled of stale sweat alone. It reeked of quiet rejection. The kind that tiptoes in beneath politeness, wears the disguise of routine, and tastes like thin ice no matter where you step. Eunice Holloway arrived early each session, pink kai crisp, eyes forward, feet steady. But now students didn't just stare. They adjusted their distance, formed silent alliances, and whispered louder. The laughter wasn't hushed anymore. It had permission now, and that permission came from the top. Coach Raylan's attitude shifted subtly. He no longer greeted her by name. He skipped her during technique demonstrations. Watch from the side, Miss Holloway. Just observe today might be tough on the joints. The suggestion always came with a tight smile, as if he were doing her a favor by keeping her off the mat. But the mat was where Eunice breathed. It wasn't about belts or praise. It was about presence. And now, she was being erased by inches. She said nothing. She never did. But her silence wasn't surrender. It was memory. Flashback. Atlanta, 1971. A younger Eunice stood on the courthouse steps, bullhorn in hand, flanked by other black women in afros and trench coats. The crowd of angry white faces below spat every name they could think of. Ghetto trash, meanger lover, jungle bitch. She didn't flinch then either. She stood firm, voice loud over the sirens. We will not sit quiet while our sons are dragged, our babies poisoned, our rights undone. Police dragged her away that day. She returned the next morning. That same steel ran through her now. But the enemy wore different armor. Casual smirks, sarcastic applause, performance evaluations cloaked in civility. The gym had its own hierarchy, invisible, brutal. And at the top of the youth tier stood Chad Riggins, 17, blonde, cocky, the son of Huxley's wealthiest insurance broker. Chad didn't just lead, he curated cruelty. Eunice became his latest art project. Damn, she even breathes like a slave owner's ghost, he joked one day while stretching. His voice carried just far enough to avoid consequences, but close enough to cut. His followers, Connor and Zaki, chuckled obediently. Even some of the parents pretended not to hear. One afternoon, Eunice found a fake AARP membership card, taped to her locker with the words Level 65, time to retire scribbled in Sharpie. She peeled it off without a word. But every bruise now throbbed longer. Every glance lingered colder, and every time Coach Raylan ignored her hand during partner pairings, she felt it. The systemic pinch that whispered, "You were never welcome here." Then the video hit, posted by a biracial girl from the class, Ivy Ramirez, 16, who had quietly filmed the moment Zaki elbowed Eunice in the face. The clip exploded online. Titled "Old Lady Wears Pink G, Gets Rocked by Jock, Still Stands Up." It went viral overnight. The comments were a war zone. She brave off. Why are they letting grandmas do this, Omile? She got heart. They just scared. Coach needs to chill. That elbow was on purpose. By morning, Pink Granny was trending. At the dojo, silence hung heavier than usual. Even Chad kept his laughter low. Coach Raylan, clearly irritated by the attention, pulled Eunice aside before class. Listen, He began, folding his arms. I'm getting calls, media inquiries. That video, it's causing a stir. Eunice met his gaze. Maybe it should, Raylan exhaled, his tone shifting. Look, this isn't about you. But look, we have a brand, a reputation. Parents are worried. About what, she asked. About someone like me being too visible. Raylan didn't answer. That week, Chad's clique printed out screenshots from the video, freezing it right when Eunice winced from Zacky's elbow. They taped it to the gym's bulletin board under the caption Cobra Cry. When Eunice walked past, Connor whispered, Guess we're doing jujitsu and geriatrics now. She paused. Her hand brushed over the picture. But she didn't tear it down. She left it there. Sometimes truth is best left exposed. At home, her grandson Kareem sat beside her on the porch. He had seen the comments too, some calling her inspirational, others mocking her existence. You sure you still want to do this, Grandma? He asked quietly. Eunice smiled faintly, her gaze fixed on the sky's dying light. They think I'm too old, too black, They're wrong. I know they are, she replied. But now they need to know. That Friday, as Coach Raylan distributed forms for the quarterly belt advancement test, Eunice the whole gym hushed. I'll be signing up, she said. Raylan blinked, caught off guard. Miss Holloway, this is a very competitive. I'll be signing up, she repeated, voice clear, unmoved. And I'll be competing. A ripple of murmurs spread through the students. Chad stared, incredulous. Coach Raylan forced a thin smile. Suit yourself. She walked the sign-up sheet, and with a black pen, signed her name. Eunice M. Holloway, in bold letters. As she turned, she caught Chad's eyes. There was no fear in hers, only purpose. That night, a private group chat of dojo students leaked onto Reddit, a thread filled with racist jokes, edited images of Eunice as a cartoon slave with a pink belt, and one message from Chad that read, if she shows up to the test, she's leaving in an ambulance. The wind had turned colder, but Eunice Holloway's resolve had only grown sharper. The more they tried to erase her, the more deeply she etched herself into the foundation of every mat she stepped on. The whispers hadn't stopped. If anything, they'd grown teeth. And yet, each night, as streetlights hummed across her porch and the town slept in quiet complicity, Eunice trained. Her backyard became her refuge. Uneven grass serving as her mat, porch railing doubling as a warm-up bar. With no access to proper gym facilities, she relied on muscle memory and the rhythm of her breath. Hours passed beneath the Georgia sky, where cicadas provided her soundtrack and silence gave her peace. She moved with grace and pain, shoulders rolling, wrists pivoting, hips sweeping with the precise, fluid geometry only years of perseverance could carve. Every motion was a tribute to the past she'd survived. To the fire hoses in Montgomery, the glares at segregated diners, the bruises from standing too tall when society demanded she kneel. But even this fragile sanctuary didn't last long. It began subtly. She approached Strongline Fitness, a local gym she had supported for years, to ask about open mat rentals. The receptionist, a young white woman with a nervous smile, consulted her screen. I'm sorry, she said, not meeting Eunice's eyes. We just changed our member access policy. No outside martial artists at this time. Eunice asked why. The girl hesitated, then added new insurance restrictions. She tried Atlas Combat Studio next. Same result. Policy change. Liability risk. No room. The rejection wasn't about mats or money. It was about message. Her name had become radioactive. At home, Kareem watched his grandmother with growing concern. 14 years old, and sharp-eyed, he had inherited her instinct for injustice and her knack for quiet rebellion. One evening, as Eunice practiced hip escapes and arm drags beneath the flicker of the back porch light, Kareem stood in the shadows with his phone, camera rolling. He said nothing, just watched her body flow like water. Efficient, powerful, unapologetic. He posted the footage to TikTok under an anonymous account. A ground game glory. Caption, 65-year-old grandma. No coach, no mat, still training, still fighting. It took less than 8 hours to hit 10,000 views. By morning it was on the For You pages of martial artist activists and everyday folks alike. Comments flooded in. Who is she? This is beautiful. That footwork is clean. I train jiu-jitsu. This lady is sharper than half my class. Someone find her and give her a platform. Kareem never told her. Not yet. But she knew something was shifting. She noticed people staring differently at the grocery store. A few whispered kindly. A white man behind her in line muttered, "Didn't realize. AARP covered MMA now," then laughed alone. Still, there were messages in her mailbox with no return address. Printed screenshots of her training frame by frame. Her face circled, her G-color mocked. One note read, "You'll break more than bones if you keep showing up." Eunice burned them. She'd burned worse in the... Kareem's video hit 100,000 views by week's end. Then came the message that made him pause. "Aren't you that kid from Iron Core?" Attached was a screenshot of his school photo, matched with clips from the backyard video. Panic gripped him. He'd used no name, no tags. Just footage. Just pride. He didn't reply. The following Monday, as they arrived at Iron Core, something in the air felt wrong. The front desk girl barely looked up. Coach Raylan stood near the edge of the mat, arms crossed, a look on his face that was somewhere between smirk and suspicion. "Kareem," he called out. "Need a word." Kareem glanced at Eunice, who gave him a nod. He stepped forward, heart thumping. Raylan pulled him aside, lowered his voice just enough to keep it civil. "You post anything online recently?" Kareem's silence spoke volumes. Raylan continued, tone cooler now, "Because we've had some visibility issues, some backlash, and someone, maybe you, is using footage of a private student without dojo clearance." "She's my grandmother," Kareem replied, trying to stand firm. "And that's not your mat. It was our backyard. Still violates the integrity of this dojo." Raylan snapped. "That kind of exposure attracts the wrong kind of attention. You're suspended until further notice." Kareem's jaw clenched. "For what?" "For endangering the reputation of Iron Core," Raylan said, voice low, eyes sharp. "And for trying to turn this place into a circus act." From across the room, Eunice watched. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the look in Kareem's eyes as he walked back to her. She didn't ask. She just placed her hand gently on his shoulder and said, "Let's." They turned and walked out together, heads high, backs straight, leaving behind the stares and the silence that once again proved louder than words. That night, Kareem uploaded a second video. A split screen. One side, the silent footage of Coach Raylan dismissing him. Other side, Eunice's backyard training. Caption, "They kicked me out, but they still can't stop her." It reached 250,000 views by midnight. The next morning, Coach Raylan issued a public dojo-wide email, stating, "Due to recent online activity, we will be revising our belt promotion eligibility requirements, effective immediately. Only students approved by the lead instructor will be permitted to test." And Eunice's name was no longer on the list. The screen light was the only thing glowing in Kareem's room. As the clock blinked 2:17 a.m., he sat frozen, eyes glued to the latest comment on his video. "Funny how y'all cry racism, then post stuff for clout. This ain't activism. It's desperation." The words clawed deeper than they should have, because Kareem knew he hadn't posted for attention. He posted for her, for Eunice, for the pride in her step, and the pink gi she never took off, even when her bones begged for rest. But now Coach Raylan had banned him, branded him a threat. And worst of all, he had erased her name from the belt test, without a word, without justification, just gone. Downstairs, the soft creak of the porch swing signaled that Eunice was still awake. Kareem stepped into the night air, his breath a plume in the chill. He found her wrapped in a faded quilt, eyes tracing the moonlight like it was handwriting. "I got us kicked out," he said without preface. Eunice didn't look surprised. She simply patted the space beside her. Kareem sat. "I just wanted them to see you," he muttered, "to see how wrong they are." "You wanted them to see truth," she said gently. "But truth don't always sit well with folks raised on lies." He let the silence stretch before asking, "So we're just supposed to take it? Let them erase you, make jokes, ban me like I'm dangerous?" Her eyes didn't leave the moon. "Baby, they've been trying to erase us for centuries. What matters is what we write in stone before they finish." He looked at her hands, rough, calloused, still graceful. She reached into the quilt pocket and pulled something small, round and worn smooth by time. A button, faded but still legible. "Dignity is a weapon." Kareem held it like it was glass. "Your grandfather wore that when they chained him to the fence at Selma," she said. "I wore it at Howard when they locked us out of the science wing for protesting." He blinked, holding back tears. "And now me, banned from jiu-jitsu, because I filmed my hero training in the yard. That's how legacy works." Eunice smiled softly. "It moves in circles, but we keep it spinning." Kareem wore the button the next day, pinned squarely on his hoodie, just above his heart. They walked into Iron Core like they'd never been humiliated, never been cast aside. Some students stared. Others looked away. Coach Raylan gave a tight nod and turned his back. Eunice went to stretch in the corner. Kareem sat quietly, earbuds in, pretending to scroll, but his hands were shaking. This wasn't protest. This was survival. That's when Chad appeared. Flanked by Connor and Zachy, he strutted over with the swagger of a boy who had never heard no unless it came with a loophole. "Nice button," Chad said, voice thick with sarcasm. "Was that from a cereal box or a pity party?" Kareem didn't look up. "Back off, man." But Chad wasn't done. "Let me guess. Now y'all think it's the civil rights movement again. Please, this is just jujitsu. You don't belong, and your granny sure as hell doesn't." Kareem stood, eyes blazing. "Say it again." "Oh, you gonna swing now?" Chad grinned. "Just like your people always overreacting." Kareem's fist clenched. His chest rose and fell in sharp waves. But Eunice's words rang in his ears. "We don't fight their way." He didn't move. Chad noticed and smirked wider. "Didn't think so." Then, in one smooth motion, Chad reached out and ripped the button clean off Kareem's hoodie. The sound was quiet, but the damage echoed. Kareem's breath caught in his throat as the metal clinked softly against the floor. He stared at it, stunned as Chad casually tossed it back at him. "Oops," he sneered. "Guess that legacy snapped like everything else." From the mat across the room, Eunice looked up, not at the button, not at Kareem, but at Chad. Her face didn't change, but her posture did. She stood, not rushed, not theatrical, just deliberate. And as the gym turned to notice, no one could quite understand why it felt suddenly colder. Coach Raylan, seeing the commotion, approached with fake concern, but instead of checking on Kareem, he addressed Eunice. "Miss Holloway, if you can't control your family's behavior, we may have to reevaluate both of your memberships." And this time Eunice didn't just stay silent. She stepped forward and said, "Then maybe it's time we reevaluate what kind of place this really is." The next morning, Eunice Holloway's body ached in places it hadn't since childbirth. Her shoulder popped with every rotation, and the faint bruise on her cheekbone had darkened to a muddy plum. Still, she laced her gi like armor and walked into Iron Core martial arts with the same unshaken calm she wore like skin. Kareem trailed behind her, hood up, eyes cast low. His hoodie no longer bore the protest button. But his silence did. That small circular loss had been more than metal. It had been memory, and now the memory stung like salt. Coach Raylan gave them both a perfunctory nod as they entered, the kind offered not out of respect but regulation. No apology, no mention of the ripped button, just indifference sharpened by protocol. The mats were freshly cleaned, but the atmosphere was anything but. Something inside Iron Core had curdled. Eunice stepped into her warm-ups, rotating her arms in slow circles, lungs expanding with deep, measured breaths. She moved deliberately, masking the stiffness in her joints, pushing past the pain blooming in her lower back. Pain, she could hand pain, had been her companion through every march, protest and whispered slur. What she couldn't tolerate, what she refused to normalize, was humiliation, and humiliation had become routine. That morning, she opened her locker to find something strange inside. A pile of pink plastic baby toys, rattles, tiny shoes, a pacifier, and a laminated photo of a cartoon grandma in a pink diaper, photoshopped onto a jujitsu mat. On the back of the image, scrawled in red marker, "Someone get her a crib," instead of a belt. Kareem stood beside her, frozen. Eunice looked down at the toys, not blinking, not flinching. Then, quietly, she gathered each item and placed them in her gym bag. No outburst, no response, but the silence burned hotter than fire. From across the locker room, Chad leaned against the wall, watching with folded arms, a smirk coiled tightly around his jaw. "Don't forget the binky," he called out, lifting one of the pink rattles and tossing it onto the bench beside her. Eunice didn't even look at him. She simply zipped the bag shut. That afternoon's sparring drills were posted on the whiteboard. Everyone got paired up, names written in thick black marker row after row. But again, Eunice's name was missing. Not by oversight, by design. Coach Raylan called out partners, voice clipped and efficient. Then glancing at Eunice, he said flatly, "We're odd-numbered today. You can observe, Miss Holloway. It wasn't the first time. But today it tasted different." She raised a hand. I'm ready to spar, she said. Raylan didn't look up. It's a matter of numbers, not readiness. I'll rotate in. He exhaled through his nose. Annoyed now. We don't rotate during drills. You know that. Around her, no one spoke up. Not even Mira, who had once smiled during drills. Not even Ivy Ramirez, who had filmed the elbow. She hadn't been back since. Silence wasn't just complicity. It had become currency. Still, Eunice stayed. She sat on the bench, back straight, face unrateable, and watched 20 students flow through techniques she'd memorized decades ago. Chad performed exaggerated moves, slamming onto the mat with theatrical flair, making sure to glance at Eunice after each fake fall. The culture had shifted fully now, not against her but around her. The dojo didn't resist the racism. It accommodated it, quietly, casually, efficiently. After class she stood to leave. Her locker was still partly open. Inside was a folded piece of paper tucked beneath the pink toys. She opened it. You're not inspiring. You're embarrassing. Stay home. There was no name, but she didn't need one. That evening, at the front desk, another parent signed their child out. A black woman named Latasha Bryant, early 30s, who had been quiet most of the month. Her daughter Zuri was 6 and had joined the Little Tigers class just 3 weeks ago. Latasha had seen the smirks, the locker glances, the absences that suddenly appeared on Eunice's file. But today, she had seen something different. She had arrived early, just in time to witness Chad toss the pink rattle at Eunice. Just in time to hear Coach Raylan's stone-cold observed directive. Just in time to feel her blood chill. She had also captured it, all of it, on her phone. At first she'd just meant to text it to a friend, out of frustration. But now her fingers hovered over the post button. The caption wrote itself. Imagine paying for your kid's respect in a place that allows this. She didn't post it. Not yet. But she saved it. And as Eunice passed her on the way out, Latasha met her eyes. I saw it, she said softly. Eunice paused, unreadable. I saw what they did, Latasha repeated. All of it. There was a beat of silence. Then Eunice gave a quiet, almost imperceptible nod. Her voice was gentle. Then don't unsee it. That night, Latasha uploaded the video anonymously to a private Facebook parent group for Huxley County Martial Arts. Within minutes, the comments began flooding in. And one of them read, I warned Raylan this would go public. He should have benched Chad months ago. Let me talk to the press first. We can still spin this. From Chad's father. By sunrise, the town of Huxley had already seen it. The video Latasha posted, raw, steady, unedited, showed everything. Chad's smug laughter. The pink rattle tossed at Eunice like a joke. Coach Raylan, ignoring it all, his face a mask of trained indifference. And then Eunice's silent, dignified exit. Not defeated but exposed. Not in failure, but in the truth of what they'd done. The video's title was simple, sharp, and emotionally loaded. Black grandma bullied at martial arts gym for wearing a pink G. Within 4 hours it was on Twitter. By noon, local news anchors were discussing it live. By the end of the day, Jun Pingshui grandma was trending again. Only this time, it wasn't just jiu-jitsu enthusiasts or civil rights activists who were watching. This time, everybody was watching. The reactions came like a flood. Some praised her. That woman's grace is stronger than any black belt. I hope she opens her own gym. She handled it with more class than I ever could. Others mocked. Okay, but why is a 65-year-old trying to be a UFC fighter? You can't cry ageism when you're literally in the wrong sport. That she pulled a muscle walking in. The racism was there, loud, coded, and clever. Some even said she was weaponizing sympathy to tear down a hard-working small business. Screenshots of Iron Core's Yelp reviews began circulating. Coach Raylan's bio, a 2-time Army vet, father of 3, was used as a shield by his defenders. They insisted he'd never allow racism on his watch. But the video was the watch. And the world had seen the time. Eunice received 5 interview requests within the first 24 hours. 2 from local news channels. 1 from a national morning show. 1 from a podcast hosted by a black former MMA champion. And 1 from a white liberal journalist who framed her pitch as, America needs this kind of strength right now. Eunice declined them all. I didn't train to become a hashtag, she told Kareem, sitting on the porch with her hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. I trained to stay alive in a world built to forget women like me. Kareem nodded, then asked quietly, so what now? She looked out across the street. where kids pedaled bikes and porch flags fluttered in the humid air. Now we make something they can't ignore. The first step came from an unexpected place. The back of an old black church. Latasha had spoken with her uncle, a retired jiu-jitsu coach, and former competitor known locally as Mr. Dell. He had once run a modest martial arts program in the 1990s for at-risk teens, but age and city zoning pushed him underground, literally into the basement of Zion Tabernacle, where the mats were cracked and uneven, but the energy was pure. When Eunice arrived, the air inside was thick with mildew and history. A rusty banner hung above the floor, faded but legible. Fight for truth, never for Mr. Dell stood waiting. Short, dark-skinned, built like a stubborn boulder with a cane in one hand, and decades in his eyes. "You're late," he said. "I was raised to be polite, not prompt," Eunice replied. He nodded. "Good. That means you're teachable." They trained in silence. No timers, no sparring partners. Just repetition, flow, precision, patience. Mr. Dell corrected her stance without comment, adjusted her pivot with a nod, and never once called her ma'am. Eunice didn't smile. She bled quietly into the floor, sweat dripping down her spine, heart pounding like gospel. In that basement she wasn't mocked. She wasn't tokenized. She wasn't too old or too black. She was just a student. Within a week, 3 other women showed up. 1 Latina, 2 black, all having seen the video and all quietly tired of being unseen in places that demanded silence for inclusion. Mr. Dell said nothing. He just brought out more mats. Back at Iron Core, the tension turned to spin. Coach Raylan issued a statement. "We are committed to inclusion. We regret any misunderstanding regarding recent events." The dojo's website changed its language, now using words like diversity and welcoming in bold, vague tones. Chad's presence, however, remained untouched. No consequences, no apologies, just repositioning. But in the back rooms of Huxley's town offices, something else was brewing. A formal complaint had been filed. The signature at the bottom belonged to Trevor Riggins, Chad's father, and a well-connected member of the County Business Association. His wording was careful, legal, and laced with veiled threat. Eunice Holloway has been increasingly confrontational within youth spaces. Her presence, amplified by her grandson's public behavior, has created an environment that some consider emotionally threatening to minors. We request a community review of her involvement. It was the same strategy used in decades past, painting dignity as aggression, resistance as threat. But this time, they added digital footprints. They referenced her viral video, her silent training, and even Mr. Dell's name, implying the new gym posed insurance and safety concerns. The complaint didn't go unnoticed. Eunice received a letter at her home. "You are hereby requested to appear at a Huxley Civic panel for community behavioral review." She read it once, then again, then folded it neatly and slid it under her coffee mug. Kareem watched her, wide-eyed. What are they trying to do? She didn't blink. What they've always done. Smear the protester to silence the protest. But just as she reached for her phone to text Latasha, a knock echoed at the door. Outside stood a man in a city uniform, holding a clipboard. His badge read, "Department of Code Enforcement. I'm here about reports of illegal gym activity in a non-commercial space." Behind him, 2 police cruisers, idle. The folding chairs were too small, the walls too white, and the windows too clean to reflect the truth. Inside Huxley's Civic Policy Hall, a room meant for local zoning and school board disputes, had transformed into a modern courtroom, minus the gavel. The only noise was the hum of cheap overhead lighting and the awkward cough of a clerk 2 rows back. At the center, seated behind a pine table with her hands folded in front of her, was Eunice Holloway, calm, dignified, wrapped in a charcoal sweater over her pink G-top, not as defiance but as reminder. To her left sat Coach Raylan, flanked by Trevor Riggins, Chad's father, dressed in a designer blazer and clutching a legal pad more for theater than necessity. A placard read, "Ishi Huxley Civic Ethics Panel. Complaint Jana 118. Community Conduct Review." Latasha, sitting in the second row with Kareem beside her, clenched her jaw as Raylan stood to speak. He began in careful, calculated phrases, the kind trained in corporate seminars and police briefings. "While I respect Ms. Holloway's contributions to our town's legacy, her behavior in recent weeks has unfortunately disrupted the healthy balance of our youth-centered environment." He cited tensions between students, online escalation, and loss of instructional authority. Every sentence ended in a phrase like regrettably or unintentionally divisive. Chad's name was never mentioned. The rattle incident? Omitted. The pink gi mockery? Ignored. Just shadows of the story, all cast on her. When it was Eunice's turn to speak, she stood slowly. Her voice was low but unwavering. I have not raised my voice. I have not raised a fist. I have not posted a single word. But I have raised a standard. One some people don't want to meet. There was a pause. A subtle shift in the room's temperature. I came to that gym not to fight, but to grow. What I met instead was a culture so used to excluding, it mistook my presence as disruption. She paused again, then turned to the panel chair. A white woman in her early 50s with tired eyes and a neutral smile. I'd like to share something, Eunice said. Latasha rose from her seat and approached, offering a USB drive. Footage played on the mounted screen, unedited, clear and damning. Chad tossing the rattle. Zaki elbowing her. Coach Raylan skipping her turn. The locker mockery. The pink baby toys. The silence was deafening. When the clip ended, a black woman on the panel, Ms. Clarice Jensen, an elementary school principal, cleared her throat. This appears to contradict the narrative presented by the complainants. Trevor Riggins cut in. With respect, this isn't about isolated moments. It's about the cumulative effect, the tension, the disruption she's caused. Clarice raised an eyebrow. She was the one attacked. Not once, not twice, but not physically injured. Raylan added quickly, and no formal complaint was made until the public video backlash, which respectfully appeared orchestrated. Eunice didn't blink. You're saying I plan to be humiliated. Trevor leaned forward. I'm saying that when adults intentionally insert themselves into youth arenas, they carry risks, insurance concerns, emotional impact, disruption of learning environments. Clarice leaned back. Sounds like she carried herself better than most adults would have. The panel murmured. The head chair cleared her throat. We appreciate all testimonies. Now we'll deliberate privately. 22 minutes later, the panel returned. The chair's face was unreadable. Given the totality of circumstances, she began, and while acknowledging Ms. Holloway's valuable past activism and personal composure, this panel must also consider the liability presented by ongoing interpersonal conflict. Kareem's fists clenched, and therefore with regret, we move to temporarily suspend Ms. Holloway's access to youth martial arts facilities affiliated with county funding, including Iron Corps. Effective immediately. Gasps rippled. Eunice remained still. No anger. No visible surprise. Just the slow blink of a woman who'd sat through bigger betrayals. Outside, press fans waited like vultures. Latasha shielded Kareem from the flashing cameras, ushering them toward the lot. Reporters shouted questions. Eunice ignored them all. She didn't speak until they reached her car. Then, quietly, they didn't fail me today. They revealed themselves. Later that night, the basement of Mount Zion Tabernacle was quiet. Only the creak of old pipes and the scent of lemon polish filling the air. Mr. Dell waited in the corner, seated on a folding chair, hands resting on his cane. I heard, he said simply. Eunice nodded. He stood slowly, walked to a worn wooden box in the corner, and opened it. Inside was a single pink belt, faded, hand-dyed, edges fraying, but strong. He held it out. For you, he said. Eunice stared. I haven't earned rank here. He shook his head. This ain't about rank. It's about truth. She looked down at the belt, then up at him. Pink's not for soft, he said. Pink's for the ones they couldn't break. Her hands trembled just slightly, as she accepted it. And for the first time in months, she allowed herself a single tear. Just as she tied the belt around her waist, her phone buzzed on the bench behind her. A message, from a blocked number. It read, You think this is over? Let's see how you like it when your family gets embarrassed next. The message lingered in her mind like smoke. Sour, thin, invisible to everyone but her. Let's see how you like it when your family gets embarrassed next. Eunice Holloway sat alone in the empty church basement. The pink belt still knotted at her waist. She hadn't told Kareem. Not yet. Some threats didn't need oxygen to grow. They just needed fear, and she'd spent her life refusing to feed it. But the words scratched old walls inside her, ones she had built, brick by painful brick, to keep the ghosts of her youth sealed away. Now they were cracking. 1964. The hallway of Grant Elementary, freshly integrated but still venomous. A girl no older than 10, clutching her books tight to her chest, had learned to map the safest route to her locker and the quickest exit to the janitor's closet when the chants got too loud. Go back to the fields. You ain't one of us. She smells like burnt toast. Sometimes the other kids said nothing at all. Just watched as she ducked into metal lockers to escape fists and spitballs. Silence could be crueler than slurs. That little girl had curled her knees to her chest, inside that dusty locker, whispering her own name to stay human. Eunice, you're still here. You're still whole. Even now, 60 years later, that voice echoed. The past had never truly left her. Her hands, steady now from years of controlled breathwork, once trembled uncontrollably the night she got the call. 1989, March 3rd. She had just finished folding Kareem's baby clothes when the knock came. 2 officers, white, uniforms crisp with empty sympathy. They told her that her husband, Daniel Holloway, had been shot during a routine traffic stop. He matched the description, they said. He reached too quickly, they said. They found no weapon, but they filed no charges. Eunice had stood at that doorway like a cracked monument, her fingers digging into the doorframe. Inside, her infant grandson cried. Outside, the police left. She buried Daniel 3 days later, on a rainy afternoon so heavy it pressed her bones down into the pew. She never remarried. She wore his wedding band on a chain beneath her clothes. Even now. Not for romance. For remembrance. The weight reminded her that vengeance is a fire that always consumes the vessel first. She never lifted her voice in rage after his death. But she lifted her hands in protest, in work, in prayer, and now, in jujitsu. Her precision on the mat wasn't about skill alone. It was about pain shaped into purpose. Every movement she made was guided by grief, refined by injustice, but never ruled by hate. That night, back home, she sat at the kitchen table, the pink gi still draped over the chair beside her. Kareem was asleep upstairs. Latasha had texted to check in, offering comfort and company, but Eunice replied only with, "I'm okay, not done yet." She opened her laptop. The screen glowed with a new email. No subject, no sender name, just a logo, black and red, and one sentence. "You're invited." Attached was a link to a private event page titled, "The 6th Underground Martial Arts Showcase, Atlanta Chapter." Below it, bold text read, "No judges, no politics, no bias, just skill, just truth. You've already proven you belong. Now show them why." There was no RSVP button, just coordinates, a time and a message. "Bring your jia. Any color." Eunice stared at the screen, unmoving, her breath caught not from fear but from memory. Years ago, Daniel had once told her, "When the system locks you out, don't knock, build another door." This felt like a door, a shadowy, unpolished, unapproved one, but a door, nonetheless. She clicked on the map location, an abandoned warehouse outside Decatur, just east of Atlanta. No signage, no sponsor, just whispers and reputations, and now somehow her name among them. Was it safe? No. Was it legal? Questionable. But was it justice? That remained to be seen. The invitation hadn't come through the media. It hadn't come from activists chasing headlines, or newsrooms seeking ratings. It came from someone watching her quietly, someone who knew that real power often moves underground, unspoken, and unseen by those who need spotlights to feel significant. Eunice closed the laptop, folded the door, then turned off the lights. But her eyes didn't close for hours. Outside beneath the porch light, a car sat idle across the street. No headlights, no movement. Inside, on the driver's dashboard, a printed copy of the underground invitation sat clipped beneath a police citation pad. And next to it, a small envelope marked, "Kareem Holloway, School Code Review Notice." The first thing Eunice noticed was the sound, not the thud of fists or the sharp slaps of mat contact, but laughter, not mocking, not hollow, real laughter, from people sweating, moving, training, not to dominate, but to belong. The warehouse didn't look like much from the outside. A sun-faded building squatting in the backlot of an industrial corridor outside Decatur. Its only sign a spray-painted 6 on a metal roll-up door. But inside, the energy pulsed, raw, electric, human. Exposed brick walls, wrapped around mismatched mats. The lighting was dim, with only 4 industrial lamps casting soft shadows. But everyone moved like they had nothing to prove, and everything to protect. This was the underground martial arts showcase, not a place of rebellion, but resurrection. No belts, no age groups, no color-coded hierarchy. Just movement, rhythm, and mutual respect. Eunice stepped onto the mat with her gi folded neatly under her arm. The pink belt peeked from beneath it. Her presence caused a ripple, not of disbelief, but recognition. Someone whispered, "That's her." And then, silence. Then, applause. It was not wild or dramatic, just warm and reverent. The way people clap when they see someone do the thing everyone said they couldn't. She didn't ask for a match. One found her. A tall Latina woman in her 30s stepped forward. "You roll?" she asked. Eunice nodded. I breathed. They bowed. And then, it began. No crowd noise, no ego. Just flow. Eunice moved like smoke, wrapped in discipline. Her movements precise, her control absolute. She used timing over power, finesse over force. She flipped out of a guard pass, reversed into side control, and locked in a slow, respectful finish. They tapped. They hugged. They bowed again. And the room clapped louder. 3 more matches followed, each with a different opponent. Younger, faster, bulkier, but none more seasoned. And every time, Eunice adapted, not with aggression but with a memory of rhythm most had forgotten existed. After her final roll, a small voice tugged at her sleeve. "Excuse me." Eunice turned to find a petite girl, no more than 10, her hair in tight black pigtails, her gi oversized and sleeves rolled awkwardly. She bowed deeply. "I saw your video," she said quietly. "They call me Flatface at my dojo." Eunice crouched. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Minji." Eunice smiled. "And what do you call you?" Minji blinked. I don't know." "Well," Eunice said, touching her chest gently, "when they call you by the wrong name, remember who you are. That's the fight." Minji nodded, eyes glassy. "Wanna roll?" The girl gasped. "With you?" Eunice grinned. "I've still got 1 match left in me." Their roll wasn't a match. It was a lesson. Eunice showed her balance by letting the girl try, fail, then try again. Each movement was a gift of patience. She whispered instruction mid-motion. She corrected with touch, never touch. By the end, Minji stood straighter. Not because she won, but because she no longer needed to. After the final roll, someone in the crowd said aloud, "She flew," and the nickname stuck. That night, someone posted a clip of her on Reddit titled, "They didn't know Grandma could still fly." Within hours, it spread across martial arts forums, parenting groups, and TikTok again. But now through admiration, not mockery. People reposted clips with captions like, "I hope I move like this at 65. She made me cry and I've never set foot on a mat." That little girl at the end, my God. Back in Huxley, the conversation changed. Not publicly, but quietly. Students from Iron Core started texting each other. "Did you see her on that showcase?" Parents whispered about what they'd missed, what they had silenced. Even Ivy Ramirez, the boracial teen who filmed the elbow, reposted the showcase clip with a single sentence. "We didn't protect her, but she still protected us." Mr. Dell printed a screenshot from the video and taped it to the basement wall. Eunice mid-sweep, one arm extended, the pink belt fluttering like a ribbon in the air. Beneath it, he wrote in chalk, "Strength isn't loud, it just doesn't fall." Later that week, while gathering her things after another underground training, Eunice was approached by a soft-spoken man in a gray jacket. He introduced himself simply, Damian Cross, Southern Regional Scout, National Martial Arts Invitational League. She raised an eyebrow. "You lost, Mr. Cross." He smiled. "Actually, I think I just found what everyone else has been sleeping on." He handed her a card. "We're launching a new format. Open division, all ranks welcome. Emphasis on form, flow, and technical mastery. Not trophies." "I'm not chasing belts," she said. He nodded. "Good. Neither are we. But we are offering platforms. And I think you deserve one that's not built on someone else's pity." Eunice didn't respond. She simply pocketed the card. He walked away, but not before turning and saying, "If you're interested, the next qualifier's in Macon. Bring that pink belt." That night, back home, Kareem sat on the couch scrolling through the showcase clips on his phone, tears pooling beneath his lashes. He looked at her. "I used to be proud just because you were my grandma," he whispered. "Now, I'm proud just because you are." Eunice looked at him, her voice soft. "We don't rise to be praised, baby. We rise because falling was never our option." While the video continued to trend online, A new comment surfaced at the top. Oop voted quickly. Funny how she inspires kids while her own grandson's about to get expelled. Huxley School Board hearing next week. Let's see if she still flies after that. The headlines came like cold rain, one drop at a time, then all at once. It started with a segment on a national morning show, Grandma in a GI inspiration, or instigation. Then came the right-wing pundits, their voices crisp, rehearsed, and dripping with concern. On a cable news panel, a conservative host squinted at the screen behind her, where a still image of Eunice mid-grapple, with Minji flashed frozen in time. Let's talk about this, the host said. 65-year-old black woman, body slamming teenagers in church basements. Is that what we're calling empowerment now? Her guest, a former police officer turned family values consultant, nodded solemnly. This is exactly the type of rhetoric we've warned about. The weaponization of victimhood. She's not just training. She's radicalizing youth, under the guise of self-defense. They used coded words, unpredictable, unstable, combative, and they flashed photos of the pink belt like it was a gang insignia. No one said angry black woman. They didn't have to. Within 48 hours, Eunice's inbox overflowed. Not with fan mail, but with vitriol. Stay in your lane. Granny, hope you break your hip in front of those kids. You're what's wrong with this country. Loud, old, and ungrateful. One bullet would quiet all that dignity. Kareem found a note tucked in their mailbox. Next time you train outside, don't be surprised if the grass bleeds too. He didn't tell Eunice at first, but she knew. She always knew. The following Saturday, they returned from Mount Zion to find their front porch spray-painted in dripping black letters. Go back to knitting. Granny Kai ain't real. The words stretched across the steps, over her welcome mat, and onto the wooden siding. The neighbors didn't call the police. No one even looked over. Kareem wanted to scream, to punch, to post. But Eunice placed a hand on his shoulder, steady as ever. Don't give them a scene, she said. He whispered back. Why not? Because they've already written the script, she answered. We just won't read from it. That night, they scrubbed the paint in silence. And when the words didn't fully come off, Eunice painted over them with her own brush, covering the message with a warm pastel pink. Not to erase it, to claim it. But beneath her calm, something shifted. Not rage, not fear, fatigue, the kind that creeps in through cracks and settles deep. She didn't say it aloud. But her body slowed. Her eyes stayed heavy longer. Her shoulders slumped, just slightly. Even when she stood tall, Kareem noticed. Mr. Dell noticed too. You're carrying too much, he said one day after training. Eunice exhaled. I've always carried too much. Dell leaned his cane against the wall. Then start handing pieces of it to the ones you've raised. The suggestion echoed. And just when she considered stepping back, just when the exhaustion nearly convinced her that the fight could go on without her, the doorbell rang. It was late. She opened it cautiously. On the porch stood a small figure, a girl, no more than 13. Blonde, pale, eyes red from crying. Eunice recognized her immediately. Chad Riggins' younger sister. The girl clutched her backpack tight, trembling. I'm sorry to bother you, she stammered. Eunice didn't speak. The girl swallowed. I saw what my brother did, what my dad helped cover up. I saw everything, and I think it's wrong. Eunice narrowed her eyes. Why are you here? The girl reached into her backpack and pulled out a notebook. On the front, pink, GI Club. My version. I want to learn, she whispered. I don't want to be like them. Eunice said nothing, just stepped aside and let her in. And crossed the street, in the shadowed passenger seat of a parked SUV. Trevor Riggins watched through binoculars, his face dark with confusion. He reached for his phone and dialed someone. She's inside, he muttered. She made contact. A voice on the other end replied coldly. Then it's time to move on her. It wasn't just a tournament, it was a spectacle. The Southern Open Combat League hadn't seen this much public interest in years. The Legacy vs. Youth exhibition was initially a minor novelty edition, a concept cooked up by marketing interns to bring variety to the bracket. But when Eunice Holloway's name appeared on the roster, everything changed. Her image captured mid-roll, pink gi cinched, braids slicked back, eyes unflinching, became the tournament's most shared post. Flyers showed her opposite younger athletes with captions like, "Age is just a number, until it throws you. The Grandmaster Grandma is back. Pink power. Black history." But underneath the viral praise came a darker current. Anonymous forums bubbled with coded hate. Threads titled "Is this even legal?" and "Political stunt, not martial art." Photos of her porch were reposted, now overlaid with mocking memes. One message simply read, "Let her fight, let her break." Eunice heard none of it. Or rather, she chose not to hear it. Instead, she trained. Mornings in the basement, afternoons with the pink G circle, evenings in quiet drills. She had no interest in dominating, only surviving with grace. For her, the mat wasn't about combat. It was a canvas. Latasha handled the logistics. She filled out medical clearance forms, sent emails, coordinated rides, arranged uniforms. She tried, several times, to hide the swelling panic in her voice when she reviewed the list of competitors. Especially one name, Chad Riggins. He'd qualified under his father's financial sponsorship, entered through a parallel circuit, and arrived on the youth champion track. No one had questioned it. When she showed Eunice the list, the older woman studied it for a long, silent moment, then simply said, "If it happens, it happened." The day of the tournament, the venue buzzed with electricity. Banners lined the high walls of the downtown sports complex. Vendors sold pink G hoodies alongside energy drinks and arm wraps. A local podcast team had set up shop just beyond the warm-up area. Their microphones pointed toward the influx of fans asking for selfies with the legend in pink. But Eunice kept to herself. She sat on a bench near the locker room, legs crossed, eyes closed. She wore her G loose, belt neatly tied, hands folded in her lap. Her breath was steady, her mind quiet. Across the venue, Chad paced like a lion in a cage. He wore a black D, embroidered with his name in red lettering. His father, Trevor, stood nearby speaking to a reporter. "She's a symbol." "Sure," Trevor was saying. "But let's not confuse social media hype with true skill. My son's the future. She's a footnote." Chad didn't smile. He didn't need to. He wanted blood not to kill, but to humiliate. Backstage, Kareem sat beside Eunice, fidgeting. "You don't have to prove anything," he said. "I'm not here to prove," she replied. "I'm here to remember." "Remember what?" She opened her eyes. "That I never swung first. But I've always stood last." The bracket order was posted at noon. A crowd surged forward, jostling for a glimpse. Chad shoved his way through, then stopped, stared, and smirked. At the top of the bracket, in bold letters, "Match 1, Eunice Holloway vs. Chad Riggins." The crowd buzzed like an exposed wire. Whispers cut through the air like blades. "They're letting that happen? Isn't that kind of dangerous? She's gonna get hurt. Or humiliate him. Either way, someone's bleeding pride." Chad cracked his knuckles. "Perfect," he muttered. In the warm-up room, Latasha grabbed the coordinator. "You sure about this? There's no regulation against minors fighting adults." The man shrugged. "It's open combat division. Age not a protected category once you sign the waiver." Eunice heard it all, and nodded. "Let it stand," she said. "It's time." As she stepped onto the mat, the crowd surged with noise. Cheers, gasps, even scattered boos. The cameras flashed. Announcers leaned into their mics with bated commentary. "And here she comes, Eunice Holloway, known across the Southeast as the Pink G Pioneer." On the opposite end, Chad adjusted his belt, bouncing on the balls of his feet, jaw clenched tight. The referee called both forward. "Match 1, open combat division. Standard rules. Bow and begin." They bowed, eyes locked. Time froze. Before the match could start, a loud voice echoed through the speakers. "Hold the match!" The crowd turned. A woman sprinted to the edge of the mat, clipboard in hand. She handed something to the official. He read it, then raised his hand. "Match postponed pending investigation." Gasps rippled, and then murmurs. Because someone had just submitted a formal allegation of misconduct against Chad Riggins. The girl's name was Maggie Riggins, and her first lesson wasn't a chokehold or an arm drag. It was silence. Eunice didn't speak for the first 15 minutes. She just moved, folding mats, rolling tape along worn seams, adjusting the thermostats in the basement at Mented Scion. Maggie followed without question, backpack still on, eyes flicking nervously toward the pink G hung neatly on the wall. Finally, Eunice turned. "Why are you really here?" she asked. Maggie blinked. "Because I don't want to be like them." "Like who?" "My dad, my brother, my coach." Everyone who looked away. Eunice studied her face, searching for performance. But there was none. Just a child trying to rewrite the script she'd inherited. Word traveled fast in the right circles, especially when it wasn't supposed to. By week's end, 2 more girls showed up. Tasha Nguyen, a high school sophomore who'd been told by her dojo's assistant coach she was too polite to ever be a competitor. And Brianna Mays, whose mother had withdrawn her from a local martial arts class after a white teen called her grape soda and mimicked monkey sounds during warm-ups. Each came quietly, their bodies unsure, their spirits knotted. Eunice didn't advertise. She didn't need to. She called it the Pink G Circle. Not a school, not a class, but a space. There were no rankings, just presence. They trained barefoot on old mats while old gospel and jazz played from a Bluetooth speaker in the corner. In between drills, they talked, not about jujitsu, but about what it meant to be seen and still unseen. Latasha returned too, not just as a mother, but as a force. She'd worked 2 decades in nonprofit administration, and within days, she'd registered the Pink Gi Circle as a community wellness initiative under a broader city grant program. She secured local sponsors, small Black-owned businesses, an immigrant-run grocery, and a local art studio, all willing to pitch in once they saw what was happening. Eunice wasn't just teaching movement, she was teaching memory. The buzz reached beyond Huxley. A Black muralist from Atlanta, Jayla Wynn, contacted Latasha after seeing one of the showcase videos. "That woman moves like she's pulling history through her arms," she said. Within 2 weeks, Jayla arrived with brushes, scaffolding, and a small crew. They took over the red brick wall outside Mount Zion's basement entrance and painted a 15-foot mural of Eunice Gi mid-twirl, belt mid-air, eyes locked forward. Beneath her image, the mural read, "Not too old, not too soft, never again too invisible." The mural ignited something unexpected. Elder Black women began appearing outside the church, slowly at first. Some came just to stare, some to pray. One woman left a folded apron beneath the wall. Another brought a photograph of her sister who had died in a segregated hospital waiting room, and then they started coming inside. 3 joined the circle the next week, one in her 60s, one 72, and one 83. They didn't roll, but they moved, and in moving they healed. Coach Raylan ignored the wave at first. He'd tightened Iron Core's class policies and banned all mention of unauthorized competitors in their student forums. Chad kept up appearances, swaggering through drills, mocking the Pink Gi mural during rides home. But one thing unnerved him more than any viral clip. Maggie stopped speaking to him. She didn't quit Iron Core, she just stopped engaging. Her movements grew sharper, her eyes distant. She wore pink socks to practice now. One day she brought in a thermos with a Pink G sticker on it. The final blow came when he found her watching Eunice's showcase clip in the locker room, smiling. Chad saw it too, and he exploded. That night at dinner, when Trevor praised Chad's latest local medal, Maggie spoke for the first time in days. "She's stronger than you," she said simply. The table froze. Trevor's fork paused midair. "What did you say?" Chad spat. Maggie didn't blink. "Eunice. She's stronger, better, kinder, and everything you'll never be." Trevor stood so fast his chair toppled. "Don't you dare talk that way in this house." But Maggie just pushed her plate aside and walked upstairs. Chad stood in his room later, fists clenched, teeth grinding. He opened his laptop and typed with shaking hands, "Southern Open Combat League, Winter Division, registration." He clicked submit. Not for glory, for revenge. Eunice didn't know about the registration yet. She only knew that her girls were growing, not just in skill, but in voice. They called each other sisters now. Not out loud, not formally, just with glances, with shared nods before drills, with inside jokes, and new nicknames. Pink wasn't softness anymore. It was armor. One Tuesday evening, Maggie walked over mid-practice and tugged gently on Eunice's sleeve. "I think you saved me," she said. Eunice bent low, meeting her eyes. "No, you saved yourself. I just left the door open." They smiled. In the far corner, Latasha snapped a photo. That photo would become the header of the Pink G Circle's website 3 weeks later, when donations reached $18,000, and the city offered them a second training space. Across town, Chad stared at a digital flyer on his phone. Southern Open Combat League, exhibition round, added, Legacy Fighters versus Youth Champions. Under Legacy Fighters, a new name had just been confirmed. Eunice Holloway. He grinned, and muttered under his breath, "Perfect." The mat remained silent for nearly 2 full minutes, an unnatural stillness for a venue that had pulsed like a drum moments earlier. All eyes were locked on the official holding the clipboard. He handed it back to the woman, an event compliance officer, then stepped forward. "The protest has been reviewed and dismissed," he announced. "Match 1 Holloway versus Riggins will proceed as scheduled." The crowd erupted. Not in cheers, not in boos, just noise, chaotic and electric. It was the sound of unresolved tension spilling across the arena like water on wax paper. Trevor Riggins whispered furiously to a tournament staffer at the edge of the ring. But no amount of status or threats could undo the paperwork now. The complaint had been filed anonymously and unsupported by evidence. Suspicious, yes, but ultimately baseless. Chad cracked his neck. Eunice simply exhaled. The ref raised his arm. "Combat ready. Begin." The bell rang, and Chad came out swinging, not literally but with his entire body. He charged low and fast, fueled more by emotion than technique. His plan was clear: overpower her early, control the match, humiliate her fast. He imagined the headlines, the revenge, the reversal of everything his sister in the world seemed to worship. But he never touched her. Eunice didn't move at first. She watched, measured, calculated, her body still but mind alive. As he closed the gap, she pivoted left, dropped low, and used his own momentum against him. And with one fluid motion, as soft as a sigh and sharp as a switchblade, she threw him. He flew, clean, across the mat. A perfect hip toss, not aggressive, not violent, but precise, controlled. He landed hard, skidding a few inches, stunned by the sudden reversal. The crowd gasped in unison. Some even stood. It was like watching gravity break its own rules. Chad blinked up at the ceiling lights, trying to breathe past the shock. His limbs twitched with confusion more than pain. It wasn't that he'd been beaten. It was that he'd been seen fully by a woman the world told him was supposed to be weak, slow, and invisible. Eunice stepped forward and offered her hand. He stared at it for a long second, the skin dark against his pale palm, the contrast impossible to ignore. Then, slowly, he took it. She pulled him gently to his feet. No smirk, no satisfaction, just present. And then she leaned close, her mouth near his ear. She whispered something. The cameras couldn't catch it. No one heard. But whatever she said made him freeze.
Not in fear, in realization.
The bell rang again. Match over. Win. Holloway.
No cheer.
No roar. Just stillness. The referee lifted her arm. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She just nodded once, then walked off the mat. Chad didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Then slowly, he followed. But instead of returning to the youth competitor's bench, he turned in the opposite direction, away from the ring, away from his father. He walked quietly toward the far corridor. Head down, alone. Trevor saw it happen from across the arena, and his jaw tightened. He pushed past event staff, his face red, tie askew. "Where the hell are you going?" he barked. Chad didn't answer, didn't even look back. Eunice sat in the corner now, water bottle in hand, wrapping and unwrapping her wrist tape with slow, meditative motion. Kareem stood beside her, wide-eyed. "You didn't have to let him up," he said. "I wasn't teaching him a lesson," she replied. He tilted his head. "Then what were you doing?" "Letting him see himself for the first time," she said. Back in the locker room, Chad stared at the mirror. His reflection looked unfamiliar. He remembered her whisper. The words were simple, but they echoed deeper than any insult he'd thrown at her, or anyone else. She'd said, "You're not your father, unless you want to be." And in that moment, bruised, breathless, disarmed, he realized he didn't want to be. Trevor stormed out of the arena, dialing a number furiously. She humiliated him. She made him weak. The voice on the other end responded coldly. "Then it's time we make her disappear from this sport permanently." The arena hadn't been designed for silence. Its walls were meant to echo roars, the crashing rhythm of sport, celebration, and spectacle. But now, it held something more sacred. Stillness. As Eunice Holloway walked toward the center podium, barefoot and breath steady, the entire venue seemed to brace. Not out of anticipation, out of reverence. The organizers hadn't planned to let her speak. No speech had been scheduled. No microphone had been set aside for legacy fighters. But something in the moment, something undeniable, had shifted. After her match with Chad, the crowd had stood without prompting. The referee, shaking slightly, leaned over and asked, "Would you like to say something?" Eunice nodded once. She stepped to the mic. The cord crackled. The screen behind her still held a freeze frame, her silhouette mid-throw, pink belt flowing like a flag behind her. Beneath it, the match result. But now, the scoreboard felt irrelevant. This wasn't about points anymore. Eunice gripped the sides of the podium gently. Her voice didn't boom. It didn't even stretch. But it landed. "We fight," she began, her tone smooth as riverstone. "Not to hurt, but to exist." The room didn't breathe. I have never swung first in my life. Not in a classroom where I was spat on. Not on a bus where I was told to move. Not when my husband never came home. And not today. She paused. "Still, I've been called a threat. Too loud. Too old. Too black. Too much." Murmurs stirred in the crowd. Even the commentators, mouths open near their microphones, said nothing. "I did not come here to win," she said. "I came because I was told I couldn't. I came because girls like Minji, Brianna, Tasha, and even boys like my grandson need to see what endurance looks like." Cameras clicked, phones raised. She turned slowly to face the young fighters seated cross-legged on the mat. "The next generation. If you ever feel like the world only claps when you stay small, remember me. Remember this gi. Remember this moment." Another pause. Then she looked to the crowd one last time, voice barely above a whisper. "Dignity is a weapon, and it never needs to draw blood to change history." Thunder. Not from the sky but from hands, erupting in applause that shook the bleachers and ricocheted through the venue. People didn't just cheer. They rose. White, black, brown, old, young, 1,000 voices, and hearts clapping in unison for something far more ancient than jujitsu. Truth. The clip hit social media before she even stepped off the podium. Latasha posted it to the Pink G Circle page first. Then the tournament account reposted it. Then CNN, ABC, and BuzzFeed picked it up. Headlines ranging from 65-year-old fighter rewrites history with 1-minute speech to Eunice Holloway, the fighter who never swung first. Within hours, the video had 2.7 million views. By morning, it crossed 10 million. But impact isn't measured in views alone. At Huxley High, something strange happened the next day. Students began arriving in pink belts, over their jeans, over their hoodies. Some made them from fabric scraps. Others borrowed from siblings. A few wrapped pink ribbons around their wrists when belts weren't allowed. At the center of it all was Maggie Riggins. She stood on the school's main staircase holding a printed quote from Eunice's speech, taped to a poster board. "We fight not to hurt, but to exist." Some students rolled their eyes. Some called it performative. But most joined. By second period, 80 students wore pink. By lunch, the local news had shown up. By dismissal, the superintendent had called for an emergency values assembly. Not to condemn, but to understand. When asked why she started it, Maggie simply replied, "Because I finally knew who I didn't want to become, and who showed me I didn't have to." Chad saw the broadcast in his room, alone. He watched as his sister held that sign with steady hands. He didn't turn it off. He didn't curse. He just sat. At Mount Zion's training basement, the mural outside had become a local landmark. Flowers appeared at its base. Postcards, notes, even small wooden carvings of pink belts, tied in perfect loops. Inside, the Pink G Circle had tripled in size. New students, new colors, new stories. And yet Eunice was still the first to arrive, the last to leave. She never stopped wiping down mats herself. Never stopped nodding at each student as they entered. Never stopped holding the door open, literally and symbolically. One afternoon, Kareem asked her, "Do you feel different now? Like you won?" She shook her head. "This was never about winning," she said. "Then what was it?" She looked at him. "It was about being seen, and then making space for others to be seen too." That night, as the sun sank behind Mount Zion's roof, a notice appeared taped to the church basement door. "This space has been reported for zoning violations. All classes are to cease immediately until further review." Below it was a printed signature. T. Riggins, City Compliance Liaison. The notice stayed taped to the door for 2 days. Eunice never touched it. She didn't tear it down or photograph it. She just stared at it, not with defeat, but familiarity. Because systems didn't change when you exposed them. They changed when you replaced them. But it wasn't just her anymore. Word spread fast. The Pink G Circle had been shut down. By morning, a line of mothers formed outside Mension's gate. Latina, Black, South Asian, biracial. Some wore hoodies. Some wore head wraps. One held a sign that read, "If teaching dignity is illegal, we'll teach it in the streets." By noon, Latasha had already started a petition. Not digital but paper, pen, and ink. The old way. Because this wasn't a hashtag. It was a movement with a heartbeat. Within 48 hours, the petition had 1,200 signatures, most from people who had never stepped foot on a mat, but who knew exactly what it felt like to be shut out of spaces that were built with invisible locks.
Then came the twist.
A local news station aired a segment about the closure, and in that segment, a parent, once a silent face in the Iron Core lobby, stepped forward. Ms. Clara Wells, white, middle-aged, and once skeptical of Eunice, gave a statement that ignited everything. "My daughter said Eunice Holloway taught her to walk tall in every room," she said. "I want my daughter to know that courage isn't cancelled by zoning codes." Her voice cracked. Shame on the ones who try. That same night, something happened that no one expected. Coach Raylan, after weeks of silence, walked into the Mount Zion parking lot and placed his old Iron Core G, folded at the base of the pink mural. On top he left a note. "I see now. I was part of the silence. I was part of the system." And then he left. No fanfare. No interview. Just silence that finally meant something. The next day, Kareem, Maggie, Latasha, and a dozen others gathered in front of the abandoned Iron Core building. It had sat empty for a month. Trevor Rigginson's name was still on the paperwork, but rumor had it, after the tournament scandal and ethics complaint filed by a former event manager, his political protection had thinned. Latasha made calls. The owners listened. A deal was struck. 1 week later, on a cloudless Saturday morning, Eunice unlocked the front door. She didn't do it alone. Beside her stood Maggie, clutching a fresh coat of pink paint. On her other side, Kareem held a crate of rolled-up mats. They stepped inside not as tenants, but as heirs to something greater. And the community came. Parents, teachers, activists, artists, elders. They filled the space, not with banners or chants, but with brushes and purpose. The walls were repainted, not just whitewashed. Murals bloomed, of Claudette Colvin in protest stance, of Yuri Kochiyama holding Malcolm's lifeless body, of Fred Korematsu, of Audre Lorde, of bell hooks. And in the center of the back wall, opposite the entrance, stood a new mural. Eunice Holloway, mid-throw, pink G billowing. Eyes forward, underneath, "We fight not to hurt, but to exist." They renamed it simply, the Pink G Project, a space for BIPOC use, LGBTQ students, immigrant girls, neurodiverse teens, anyone who had ever been told they were too much or not enough for traditional spaces. There were no trophies, no rankings, just breath and boundary and belief. Eunice didn't call herself founder. She called herself the first key holder. And every student who walked in got their own, a small pink tag with their name etched into it, symbolizing access that couldn't be revoked by politics, privilege, or fear. The gym played music between sessions. Students shared meals after training. And on Sundays, they held story circles, where tears and truth were tapped out like breath against the mat. Kareem helped teach now. Maggie became the first youth mentor. Even Chad visited once. Unannounced, head low, eyes hesitant. He stood at the mural, whispered something no one heard, then left. No one stopped him. No one judged him. Because here, even transformation had a place. Then, one afternoon, the front door creaked open slowly. A girl, maybe 7 years old, stepped inside. Her shoes were mismatched, her curls frizzy, but her posture bold. She wore a homemade pink belt tied tight around her coat. She paused when she saw Eunice. Wide eyes, silent awe. "Hi," she said softly. "Is this the place?" Eunice knelt. "What place, baby?" The girl swallowed. "The one where people like me get to feel strong." Eunice smiled. She opened her arms and motioned her in. "Well," she said, "you're right on time." As the girl stepped forward, she glanced back at the mural, the one of Eunice mid-throw. She pointed at it and asked, "Can I be like her?" Eunice looked at her, held her gaze, and whispered, "No, baby. You can be better." The camera faded out, but the movement, the mat stayed. If this story made you pause, don't look away. Share it with someone who still believes quiet strength can't shake a room. Talk about it at your dinner table, your classrooms, your gyms, Because the next Eunice might be watching, waiting for the world to open the door. Make sure it opens wide enough for her and everyone behind